The global mainstream media ecosystem is heavily focused on the United States right now. CNN and major network broadcasters are reporting night and day from New Jersey and Washington, telling a singular story of absolute American economic dominance. President Donald Trump is preparing to welcome 48 nations for the 2026 FIFA World Cup, a massive tournament projected to move $80 billion in global economic output through North America. The common consensus across Wall Street is straightforward and unquestioned. The United States hosts the knockout rounds, MetLife Stadium holds the final, and the United States captures all the money. That consensus is completely wrong. While major American metropolitan areas are currently scrambling to pitch local dry cleaners and neighborhood family businesses for tournament sponsorships because draconian contracts from Zurich banned them from signing larger corporate deals, Canada has quietly secured $3.8 billion in verified economic output from this exact same tournament. The Canadian government secured 13 matches, 24,000 real jobs, and $700 million in government revenue. Most importantly, the political leadership in Ottawa achieved this without overbuilding a single stadium. The United States has fallen into a historic financial trap. 11 American host cities are currently staring down a combined shortfall of at least $250 million, forcing the federal government to debate an emergency security funding package worth $625 million just to prevent localized fiscal collapse. The grand promise of the biggest sporting event on earth has mutated into what close negotiators are calling the worst hosting deal in sports history. This analysis goes completely beyond the polished public relations campaigns and the superficial broadcast headlines. The reality of global sports economics is not defined by who lifts the trophy in July, but by who negotiated the financial terms before the first whistle blew. Welcome to Aftershock, where complex global market strategies and economic shifts are broken down through deep research. The final section of this analysis contains the most critical financial takeaway, a revelation that will fundamentally change how you view the true winners and losers of global mega events. The United States has the spectacle, but Canada has the money. The structural devastation began in March 2024 inside the closed executive suites of the FIFA headquarters in Zurich, Switzerland. During a private session lasting exactly 42 minutes, the governing body of world football quietly executed a total bureaucratic coup. They completely dismantled the traditional local organizing committee framework that had governed every single tournament since 1930. By bringing all logistics, ticket sales, broadcast rights, and sponsorship management strictly in-house, Zurich centralized absolute financial control. No local shared responsibility, no local revenue sharing, no local veto power. The governing body effectively stripped host nations of their sovereign economic rights. The real crisis struck American municipal governments later that autumn on October 14th at exactly 14:15. Inside a tense teleconference between city stadium authorities and international sports marketing executives, the true depth of the corporate blockade became undeniable. When you read the leaked minutes of that meeting, the panic is palpable. Local planners opened the Tier 3 commercial contract packages to realize that the category restrictions were mathematically absolute. A representative from Texas noted that a prominent metropolitan bank could not purchase a city sponsorship tier because Bank of America held a sweeping global tournament monopoly. Minutes later, officials in California discovered a local gourmet burger franchise was entirely banned because McDonald's possessed exclusive territorial rights over the entire food sector. The restrictions cascaded ruthlessly down through the commercial landscape. No local banks, no local restaurants, no local tech firms. The trap snapped shut. This is where the stark contrast between impulsive political ambition and cold, analytical prudence became obvious to everyone involved. The bidding committees in major metropolitan areas had rushed forward blindly, driven by the intoxicating promise of global television exposure and political prestige. They signed the binding multi-hundred-page host city agreements without stress testing the actual operational demands. But the leadership in Chicago and Phoenix operated with a chilling financial realism. Years earlier, after reviewing the initial non-negotiable tax concessions and the absolute lack of fiscal transparency, officials in those two specific municipalities walked away from the negotiation table completely. Mainstream sports commentators initially called those decisions timid. Today, those decisions look like masterclasses in public asset protection. Chicago walked away, Phoenix survived. The receipts of this structural failure are now public. The 11 American host cities are currently confronting a collective budget deficit of at least $250 million. In Washington, a federal security funding package worth $625 million remains entirely gridlocked in legislative committees, leaving local police departments to bear the immense operational costs alone. While American mayors were actively parading under stadium lights, the actual money was already flowing directly back to bank accounts in Switzerland. American cities assumed they were partners in a historic global sports celebration. In reality, they were merely uncompensated service providers for a multi-billion-dollar corporate monopoly. To truly understand the modern dynamic of the World Cup, you have to look beneath the surface of the international sporting spectacle. You must look past the flags, past the national anthems, and past the public relations campaigns. This is not a story about global unity. This is a predatory economic structure perfected over decades. Economists call it sports colonialism. Under this structural model, the host nation assumes 100% of the financial risk, strips its own taxpayers of billions of dollars, and constructs massive infrastructure. Corporate executives extract the raw commercial value and exit the country entirely tax-free. The receipts of this historical pattern are devastatingly clear. Consider the state of South Africa in 2010. The South African government invested approximately $3.9 billion of public capital to prepare for the tournament, including over $1 billion dedicated exclusively to stadium construction. The political elite promised a massive, transformative wave of international tourism. The actual data tells a completely different story. South Africa attracted roughly half of the projected number of international visitors. Academic economists later calculated that the government spent an average hidden cost of $13,000 for every single tourist who arrived. Meanwhile, Zurich generated $3.36 billion in direct revenue. The ultimate macroeconomic impact was catastrophic. Economic growth in South Africa did not accelerate during the tournament period. It slowed down drastically, plummeting from 4.6% to 2.6%. The economic destruction expanded even further during the tournament in Brazil in 2014. The Brazilian government diverted $15 billion from essential public services to construct a sprawling tournament infrastructure across 12 host cities. It was an exercise in absolute fiscal recklessness. 5 of those 12 municipal governments openly admitted they failed to complete the promised public transportation systems before the opening match kicked off. Multiple newly constructed multi-million-dollar arenas immediately became completely useless after the final whistle blew. They became classic white elephants. Arenas built for hundreds of millions of dollars were literally converted into parking lots for municipal buses. Brazil did not experience an economic renaissance. Brazil experienced negative gross domestic product growth in the immediate years that followed. The national wealth was completely misallocated. Not a temporary setback, not a minor miscalculation, but a structural trap. This historical reality is the exact reason why the economic establishment was shocked by what happened next. When the 2026 tournament cycle began, the international community expected Canada to follow this identical path of reckless expenditure. But the leadership in Ottawa looked directly at the financial wreckage of South Africa and Brazil. They rejected the old order entirely. They looked at the numbers and chose a fundamentally different path. It is a philosophy known as asset-based pragmatism. Canada recognized that a mega event must serve the domestic economy, not the other way around. While the United States fell headfirst into the traditional trap of prestige hosting, Canada prepared a silent financial counteroffensive. Canada engineered a brilliant financial defensive strategy that completely bypassed the trap. While the United States signed aggressive corporate-centric deals, Canada used its existing infrastructure as a massive economic shield. The political leadership in Ottawa refused to allocate public capital for new construction. They entered the tournament utilizing 2 highly functional, multi-purpose municipal stadiums that were already operational. Look closely at the hard data from Toronto and Vancouver. Instead of spending billions of dollars to build disposable arenas from scratch, Canada executed a highly targeted investment plan. They allocated exactly $145 million to renovate BMO Field in Toronto and exactly $180 million to upgrade BC Place in Vancouver. This distinction is not a cosmetic detail. This is the precise line separating a reckless political vanity project from an intelligent public asset upgrade. This money did not dissolve into thin air when the tournament began. This money did not vanish into single-use facilities. This money upgraded permanent municipal infrastructure. Long after the international teams leave North America, these stadiums will continue generating economic value. They are homes to major MLS franchises. They are homes to historic CFL franchises. They are premier concert venues and massive civic gathering spaces for decades to come. Canada did not overbuild. Canada optimized. The real disruption to mainstream economic narratives comes from a highly analytical June 2026 report released by BMO Economics. This specific document punctures the superficial $3.8 billion headline figure that public relations committees are constantly repeating. The chief economist at BMO directly exposed the psychological illusion of mega event wealth. True economic value is completely misunderstood by the public. When a family from Toronto spends $800 to attend a match at BMO Field instead of taking a local weekend vacation, no new wealth enters the country. The gross domestic product does not expand by $800. This is consumption displacement. The money is simply moving from a local restaurant or a regional theater into a stadium seat. It is consumption relocation, not consumption creation. You are witnessing a massive shell game played by corporate interests. The true net economic benefit, what economists call genuine additionality, is generated strictly by international visitors. The true receipts are written in foreign exchange currency. The real economic signal is found in hotel rooms booked by fans traveling from Madrid, Buenos Aires, or Tokyo. This is where Canada's calculated strategy creates a powerful boomerang effect against the centralized FIFA model. Zurich designed a system to bleed municipal budgets dry through endless infrastructure demands, but Canada's pre-existing venues neutralize that leverage entirely. FIFA can extract ticket revenues, but they cannot extract the permanent structural value left behind in British Columbia and Ontario. By keeping infrastructure costs exceptionally low, Canada ensured that the foreign currency injected by international tourists actually generates a positive return on investment. The Deloitte report commissioned on behalf of the host committees confirmed a positive gross domestic product multiplier of 1.9 for every single public dollar spent. Canada forced the centralized corporate monopoly to work in its favor. You are looking at a masterclass in macroeconomic judo. While the United States absorbed massive losses by chasing prestige, Canada turned an exploitative corporate framework into a highly localized public victory. The trap backfired completely. This macroeconomic chess match directly hits your personal bank account. Mainstream financial networks are distracting the public with high-definition broadcast graphics while completely ignoring the real fiscal data under your nose. Statistics Canada released an alarming report in late May 2026, confirming that the Canadian economy contracted for a second consecutive quarter. This means Canada is officially in a technical recession. Real gross domestic product dropped by an annualized 0.1% in the first quarter of 2026, following a revised 1% annualized decline in the final quarter of 2025. Business capital investment has plummeted for 5 straight quarters, crushed by aggressive tariff uncertainty from the ongoing United States and Canada trade dispute. Housing activity remains suppressed, inflation continues to erode consumer purchasing power, and local jobs are increasingly vulnerable. Your wallet is absorbing the pressure of this downturn, and the local tax dollars you pay are being aggressively reassigned. The Parliamentary Budget Officer recently confirmed that total government spending to host these 13 matches has reached just over $1.066 billion. The federal government in Ottawa contributed $473 million, while provincial and municipal authorities provided the remaining $593 million. When you divide that total cost across 13 games, your government is spending approximately $82 million of public money per match. The city-level trajectory reveals an even more terrifying escalation of public debt. When Toronto City Council originally evaluated the World Cup bid back in 2018, officials promised citizens the total cost would not exceed $45 million. The final bill for Toronto came in at $380 million. That is an explosive budget increase of 844% over the original estimate. Vancouver experienced a similar fiscal catastrophe. Their original 2023 cost estimate was $230 million for 5 games, but the final numbers climbed to between $532 million and $624 million. This is the hidden tax you pay for global prestige. This massive inflation of hosting costs is not a product of simple negligence. It is the natural consequence of severe operational complexity, expanding security mandates, and escalating technical standards weaponized by Zurich. The chief economist at BMO offered a telling perspective, stating that under present conditions, even modest growth should be viewed as a win. This statement exposes the desperate reality facing the country. The $3.8 billion tournament output is not a glorious structural economic transformation. It is a temporary tourniquet. Your public capital was diverted into an elite sporting event at the exact moment your domestic industries needed stabilization. If the projected $700 million in government tax revenue fails to fully materialize, individual taxpayers will be forced to shoulder the structural deficit through reduced public services or increased municipal fees. The financial consequence of this tournament does not stop at the stadium gates. It impacts interest rates, shapes infrastructure priorities, and dictates the precise health of your local economy for years. While corporate sponsors collect tax-free profits, the burden of the bill settles directly on your doorstep. The United States has the spectacle, Canada has a temporary shield, but you are the one holding the invoice. The best-case scenario over the next 3 months hinges entirely on the velocity of foreign tourist spending. If the $700 million in projected government tax revenue is realized at even 60%, the cash infusion will enter public treasuries immediately. This capital will act as a temporary stabilization buffer, helping Ontario and British Columbia offset the worst pressures of the current technical recession, while the permanent stadium upgrades at BMO Field and BC Place begin transitioning into profitable assets for the domestic sports calendar. The worst-case scenario involves an aggressive escalation of hidden operational cost overruns. If localized security mandates and technical requirements from Zurich continue to push municipal budgets over the next 90 days, the total public price tag will surpass $1.2 billion. This will completely erase the slim profit margins, forcing local taxpayers in Toronto and Vancouver to directly absorb the structural deficit at the exact moment the waves of trade tariff uncertainty are actively suppressing domestic investment. The most likely scenario is a highly calculated qualified victory. Canada will not experience a glorious structural transformation, but the country will successfully capture a modest, short-lived economic cushion. The foreign exchange currency injected by international visitors will temporarily stabilize the hospitality sector, while the targeted stadium renovations remain permanent, functioning public assets rather than empty architectural liabilities. This economic reality sends an undeniable policy signal across the entire global sports ecosystem. Looking ahead to the 2031 FIFA Women's World Cup, where the United States is slated to co-host again, the structural flaws of the current centralized model are forcing a total realignment. Sources close to municipal planning authorities confirm that multiple American cities would refuse to sign the exact same exploitative agreements today. The rational, calculating blueprint established by Chicago, which walked away from the tournament entirely to focus on localized tourism campaigns without bearing massive security liabilities, is being studied by sovereign governments as the new standard of fiscal sanity. The ultimate battle of the 2026 World Cup was decided long before a single ball was kicked under the stadium lights. FIFA extracted its multi-billion-dollar tax-free fortune, the United States absorbed a massive municipal deficit for global prestige, and Canada deployed a pragmatic, asset-based defense to protect its public capital during a technical recession. The most critical lesson of this tournament is not who scored on the pitch, but who retained structural leverage over the money flow. You must look past the superficial headlines of corporate entertainment to see the underlying economic warfare. The central dilemma facing every taxpayer remains absolute. You must decide whether global sports monopolies are genuinely delivering shared prosperity, or if sovereign nations are merely subsidizing a private corporate empire. Leave your specific analysis in the comment section below. Click the subscribe button on Aftershock to join our network of deep macroeconomic investigation.